Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. All right, what's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with the King in Black from Marvel Comics. Something that I do want to clarify, though, I was incorrect in the first King in Black video that I made that it was simply just a one-shot. The reading order I'd looked at before did not show King in Black parts 2 through 5, so I thought it was simply just a one-shot opening comic, and that was basically it. It turns out that King in Black is an actual main series, right? So it's issues 1 through 5, King in Black 1 through 5, and then a whole bunch of tie-ins for it. So I do want to correct that. I was incorrect about that. A lot of you guys pointed that out in the comments. So thank you for that. I would not have known had you guys not mentioned it. But this one kind of opens up. This is the Venom tie-in, right? This one opens up basically with Eddie Brock kind of falling to his death at the end of the first King in Black story when Knull just stripped him of his symbiote and then dropped him. But what this does is it initially starts out with Rex Strickland. Now, Rex Strickland was the first of the individuals out there to be bonded to the Grendel, right? So just kind of a reminder of the timeline here. If we go on the way things used to be before Donny Cates' Venom run, all you had was a Venom symbiote that bonded to Eddie Brock. Over the years, a lot has been done to change things, and Donny Cates has introduced a lot of information that we didn't previously have. And what Donny Cates introduced was the character of Knull, who by this point you guys should know as kind of the guy who created the symbiotes, but then also the Grendel. And the Grendel was kind of a step above your regular symbiote, right? So you have like the one that bonds to Eddie Brock, which makes him Venom, or like the Carnage symbiote that bonds to Cletus Cassidy, which makes him Carnage, so on and so forth. The Grendel's kind of a step above that, right? So if there were a hierarchy here, he'd be between Venom and like Knull, or something along those lines. And even within that, you have your own little hierarchy insofar as like where the Venom symbiotes rank, and we might create a video like that, right? Like ranking the Venom symbiotes from strongest to weakest. But the idea is that Rex Strickland and his team were basically bonded to what was the Grendel symbiote. So they were a little more powerful than Venom normally is. There was a point where really in the beginning of Donny Cates' run, when he first started on Venom, where Eddie was contacted by Rex Strickland and then sent on a mission. Now we ended up learning that Rex had actually bonded, or really the symbiote had kind of replaced Rex after Rex had died, so he's kind of a walking, talking symbiote. But Eddie was sent on a mission to basically save, those guys who were out there, those other symbiotes. What we never really saw was what was going on in the background while Eddie was doing that, involving Rex. And what Rex really does is he kind of talks about the nature of Eddie. Now, this is important because this kind of monologue that Rex Strickland offers in the form of a diary entry kind of overlays everything that we see going on in this comic, right? And so one of the things that he sort of hits at here is that sending Eddie on this mission was almost as much of a test as it was just the need for help. And the reason why the test aspect came in is because with Rex Strickland and his Grendel, he became aware of the nature of Knull, Knull's existence, the power he possessed, and the fact that Knull would return to Earth one day. And so looking at that, it was kind of like, okay, if Eddie can't do something as simple as like face off against these Grendels and basically stop them, then what hope could he possibly have against somebody like Knull? But as you saw with Rex kind of talking about Eddie Brock and so on and so forth, one of the things that he talks about is Flash Thompson as Agent Venom. And that Flash Thompson as Agent Venom was a far more effective Venom than Eddie Brock was. Now, a lot of that was because of the military training and history that Flash Thompson had, and the fact that he was basically a government-sanctioned symbiote, kind of operating out there doing his own thing, but he was a lot more effective. He understood the necessity of nuance. He understood getting in there and kind of practicing espionage, stealth tactics, different things like that. He's not like Eddie, right? Eddie is a guy who just goes running in, guns blazing, right? Even if he doesn't need to, and even when he shouldn't, it's all he really knows, right? He's just kind of a blunt object, just attacking whatever's in front of him. That's why a lot of fans really liked Flash Thompson as Agent Venom more than Eddie Brock, because you got to see somebody use the Venom symbiote in a way that you normally never really see, which is why I say we should probably cover that story, if for no other reason than the fact that it could really kind of permeate and attach itself to this story, kind of bookend, and show us how the other, how the symbiotes can be used. But at the end of the day, Rex kind of, he hopes the best for Eddie Brock, but he's not 100% sure that Eddie Brock can really even succeed, because looking at everything that's going on, individuals possessed by the Grendel symbiote and all that kind of stuff, the return of Knull, his fear is that Eddie will fail, right? Eddie will fail to rise to this occasion, and in the end, he'll end up dying just like everybody else. And that's kind of the thing that we get here, because we transition to the moment when Knull drops Eddie Brock. And with a quickness, Eddie was taken over exceedingly fast. And that's one of the big struggles that we're kind of left to solve here with regards to the King in Black story. Because what you're talking about is a being so astronomically powerful, he was able to overtake take the Celestials. That's no small feat, right? Being able to run up on a celestial being, these guys create like, life, they create, stars and galaxies. They're on par with Galactus in terms of power. And so being able to subjugate a multitude of Celestials is not a small thing here. So then you have like Eddie Brock with a Venom symbiote. And it's kind of like, how could he possibly hope to stand against Knull in the first place? And that's the first thing that Donny Cates showed us, right? Knull ripped the symbiote off of Eddie Brock, dropped Eddie Brock to his death, and the symbiote actually begs and pleads, right? It's like, no, like, do not take me from Eddie. He absolutely needs me. This is really one of the best developments that came from the work of Donny Cates and even some of the people that came before him with regards to the Venom stories, is it gave the Venom symbiote more humanity. Instead of it just being this symbiote that bonded to Eddie Brock and it was pissed off that Spider-Man rejected it and they're just gonna get revenge by doing bad things, and then eventually he teams up with Spider-Man to fight Carnage. Instead of something like that, the Venom symbiote actually has a mind of its own. It has desires, it has ambitions. It wants to stay a good guy. It doesn't want to be, kind of enveloped into the fold of Knull and kind of taken to a place of subservience. It wants to keep being a good guy alongside Eddie. And that's cool. That's a really, really amazing concept. But ultimately, the Venom symbiote is seemingly absorbed by Knull back into his essence. And then in turn, Eddie's just kind of left to fall to his death. Now, this is probably one of the most beautiful moments of this story, right? And this is why Donny Cates smashes it when it comes to his handling of Venom. So here's the thing. This is what's so cool about this. Stories like this, these are the kind of stories that we reference when we do character explanation videos or something like that, about how like a character is totally reworked. So like when we talked about Magneto, for example, we talked about how like with Uncanny X-Men issue number 200, Magneto totally changed and became a good guy. This is the equivalent of that, right? It's a little more long form insofar as the transition of Eddie Brock becoming a good guy. It certainly, happened a lot longer than the transition of Magneto, but the principle's still the same, right? If in 10 years we do a video, kind of an updated video on Venom Explained, we'll reference this, right? And we'll say like, once Donny Cates took over the title, he totally changed up Eddie Brock and the Venom symbiote and kind of revamped them into a whole new form and so on and so forth. This is what we're talking about here, right? So you guys are kind of seeing this happen in real time. But for Eddie Brock himself, he kind of looks at this and literally starts to pray. And that's something that we don't really see of Eddie, because Eddie's not an overly religious man, and just kind of says, look, like, I'm praying to whatever God is up there listening. I'm not really worried about me. I'm probably just going to fall to my death. This will be the end. But what I'm asking here is that you basically keep an eye on my kid, right? Make sure my son is okay. That Dylan does not deserve to inherit my darkness, right? This kind of horrific circumstance that I've been living in my entire life, this desire for revenge and all this anger and wrath that I've been filled with over the course of my life, right? This thing that's dominated me, right? This thing that's controlled every waking hour, everything that makes me who I am. Do not let my son inherit it. Now, one thing that I do want to point out, pretty much everything from the time that Knull drops Eddie Brock until we get to the end of this comic happens in the span of 32 seconds. 32 seconds, and that's all you get. And I love stories like that, right? Where like all these things happen in the span of 32 seconds. While Eddie Brock's falling to his death, these symbiotes of Knull they're getting to work, right? Like they're attacking New York. The Avengers are all being just kind of taken over by the symbiotes, right? Spider-Man's doing what he can, Captain America's doing what he can, but they're literally fighting a living army of beings that are almost kind of like a walking, talking liquid. It's very difficult to overcome that, especially when they're empowered by a guy who's a multiversal force of power, right? It's not a simple thing. And so as Eddie Brock continues to fall, he begins to realize the entirety of New York is basically lost, right? It's essentially conquered. Now from there, you switch over to Dylan, right? Again, this is still in the span of this 32 seconds. You switch over to Dylan, and Dylan, kind of has a radio of sorts and manages to hijack or somehow attach himself to the frequency that Iron Man and all the Avengers are on. And Iron Man's kind of like, how in the world did you possibly get this? He's like, well, I got it from some person. Spider-Man, he gets pissed off at Spider-Man because he thinks he's the one that gave it to Dylan. But at the end of the day, Iron Man's like, look, you got to keep this radio channel clear, right? Like, this is how the Avengers are talking to each other. We need to know what's going on. We can't have some kid, hijacking the airways, wanting to know what happened to his dad. We've got it under control. We're doing the best we can here. If you've got a TV, watch that instead. And then cuts off Dylan. And Dylan starts to get pissed off because when that happens, he literally tries to reach out with his abilities to tap into Knull and kind of see what's happening. But then the actual Venom symbiote itself, which is still part of Knull, actually pushes out Dylan and says, no, you cannot access this. You cannot access Knull. If you access Knull, he'll know where you are, right? He'll figure out where it is that you're at and he'll come for you, right? So no, like, get out of the brain of Knull and just forcefully ejects him. And for Dylan's part, when he was talking to the symbiote, he felt fear, right? He felt fear fear and absolute panic. And that's when he's kind of like, you know, my connection was severed. What did they not like? What didn't it want me to see? And that's when he looks up at the TV and he sees Knull ripping off the symbiote of Eddie Brock. Now, of course, he's seeing this after it's already happened, but he's seeing like the symbiote being ripped off Eddie and then Eddie being thrown to his death. And so as Eddie continues to fall, there's actually a helicopter that's trying to outrun one of these giant, you know, these grindles, right? One of these giant, you know, symbiote bats, whatever you want to call them, symbiote dragons. Eddie kind of warns him, like, you can't outfly this thing, right? Like, you've got to just, you literally have to land somewhere and just run for your life. But by that point, the dragon gets a hold of the helicopter. Helicopter basically ends up crashing down. And then Eddie, kind of caught in the explosion, gets sent flying. Now, the funny thing about this is that the very fact that he was sent flying through here starts bouncing off these, you know, the kind of walls and things like that. It's probably broken every single bone in his body, or at least most of them, but he'll survive. And the reason why is because he goes crash landing onto a car, which is covered in symbiote goo. But with that being said, guys, that's where it ends. This massive cliffhanger. If you guys are new here to Comments Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like. And I gotta tell you guys, I am absolutely loving King in Black. It was every bit worth the wait. It was every ounce worth the wait. Like, let me know what you guys think, right? Because I love it. Let me know what you guys think about King in Black. Do you guys love it? Is it just one of the coolest things? But yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.